All right, everybody. Tuesday, March 4th, early in the morning here. I'm joined with Ed, Hokie Hoops podcast. We are going to post this separately on the feed and also separately on the YouTube. We just wanted to have a quick conversation about the Jeff Goodman tweet, Coach Mike Young at Virginia Tech, and just an overall conversation of NIL and Coach Mike Young's career at Virginia Tech. This all comes on the heels of Jeff Goodman's tweet, Goodman Hoops, one of the best in the business, does a great job. His tweet read, Virginia Tech coach Mike Young is expected to return next season with an increased NIL package, source told the Field of 68. Young made the NCAA tourney in 2021 and 2022, the NI2 the last 2 years, and is 13-16 this season. Young will have more NIL resources next season to get the program back on track. Ed, I think the best place to start this conversation is probably around just the rumors that swirled all season about his involvement with Virginia Tech, his continued involvement with Virginia Tech. I feel like the dialogue for a lot of the season, you saw Coach Bennett step down, you saw Florida State lose their coach, you saw Boeheim step down. We've seen a lot of coaches basically throw in the towel and say, look, this new age of NILs, everything is so different. I don't want anything to do with it, and stepping down in the middle of the season. So what has been your take on that before? Because I very much viewed when he went on ACC PM and he had his interview, that was the first time that he really publicly stated, I like being at Virginia Tech. I have what I need at Virginia Tech. But what did you hear before that?
It was kind of all just, speculation. You mentioned all the names that stepped down, Bennett, Larinaga, Hamilton after the season. You see all these coaches dropping like flies in the league, and that's not even to mention the legends who have left, in the 2 years prior. The coaching turnover in the league has been crazy. I believe currently Coach Young is the longest tenured coach in the league. So it's all kind of just speculation around that, and things weren't going well for the first half of the season, really struggled in non-conference play. So everyone's kind of just assuming, well, he's either going to get fired because this team stinks, or he's just going to decide, I don't want to do this anymore. He's had a long career. I'm sure he's done well financially. I'm sure he's got a good investment group, and he's figured it out, and he could retire, I'm guessing. But he kind of put his foot down and said, I'm happy. I'm enjoying coaching this team. And that was exciting to see. And I think, you can tell it's genuine on his ACC PM hit where he's talking about how much he's enjoying coaching this team. Well, if he wasn't genuine, you wouldn't be seeing the results you're seeing, because that stuff flows down from the head coach to the players, and his ability to stay locked in, enjoy what he's doing, has passed on to the guys. And as a result, you've seen the team continue to play better. So I think it was all kind of just, looking at what's going on around the league and around college basketball, assuming Coach Young might want to do something similar, but he's made it pretty clear that he's super happy at Virginia Tech and, loves what he's doing, and is not as disgusted with the state of affairs in college basketball maybe as some of his counterparts are.
So what we're going to do is we're going to run through essentially his career. We're going to run through the NIL situation at Virginia Tech, how the House settlement is being handled across the ACC, what we have public. Everything that we discussed today is going to be things that are confirmed or publicly available. I first want to start with, we're going to get into all of these numbers later, 2024, 2025, Virginia Tech is 13-16. However, they were picked to finish 14th. The dialogue around the team was, man, we're probably not going to go to the ACC tournament. This is not a good basketball team. And you can point to, well, we decided to recruit a point guard who was involved in some sort of legal situation. But you're also grasping at straws when Jaden Ivey-Curry decides to enter into the league, go to another team. They're all kind of scrambling. And this Virginia Tech team is currently 9th in the ACC, has played really well, played fantastic against the Louisville team that'll do a really good job in the tournament, played well against some really good teams at the beginning of the year. And honestly, I'm very fired up and proud of how this team has gone out there to play, to the point of going into a gunfight with a knife. I want to be careful with this, because this is not necessarily an indictment on where Virginia Tech is in terms of funding at a whole. We saw what football team we put on the field last year. We have guys that are testing very well, at the combine. We have guys that were highly sought after by other schools. They went out, tested very well, will have a long career in the NFL. Unfortunately, the football team went 6-6. So this is where we are in terms of NIL to date. Virginia Tech is a bottom fourth of the league in NIL funding across the ACC. Again, a large part of this has to do with prioritizing football, which you can make your own decision on that. I think most people would agree that that is what we want to see. It goes along with the history of the school. It just hasn't panned out to date up until this point. Now, you can look at Kenny Brooks. You can look at Buzz Williams. They were probably not thrilled with that direction and chose to go in a different direction. Meanwhile, Mike Young has not complained. He has not thrown his hands in the air. He's gone out there with the team that he has, and he has done, in my estimation, a very good job. Now, when Goodman alludes to we will have an increase in funding, a huge part of that is a $20.5 million per year that will be split across all sports at Virginia Tech and most schools, which will really help in leveling the playing field. Now, we do not have Virginia Tech's number in terms of what exactly they're going to do with percentages, how much goes to football, how much goes to basketball, how much goes to wrestling, baseball, women's basketball. But some of the numbers that we were able to find, Clemson is projecting 15% of that $20 million to go to basketball. That would be a hair over $3 million. Texas Tech is projecting 17 to 18%. So I think that's going to kind of sit in as an industry standard for Power 5 schools that are focused primarily on football, or maybe just have a football team that's worth funding. I say that because you can look at UConn, and they announced their numbers that 50% of that $20.5 million will be going to basketball. Completely understandable. And that's obviously going to be similar with a couple of schools, especially if you look into the Big East. But given all of that information, Ed, I have to tip my cap to you because coming into the season, I'll let you answer this. What was your goal coming into the season? Like with Hokie Hoops podcast, Virginia Tech, obviously the same way that the money split up, so is the coverage in the media. I think for as long as I've been in the space, maybe pre-Kenny getting into the Final Four and pre-us winning the ACC in basketball, coverage for men's basketball and women's basketball has been kind of mailed in. So what you see happen is when football underachieves, everybody turns all of their attention to women's basketball, men's basketball, softball, wrestling, and baseball. Mm-hmm. And this is not I'll be the first person to tell you, I am not a ball knower. So it has been really helpful to listen to you talk about it. And I think it is so important because if you want to figure out where you want to go and you want to figure out how to improve, you first have to accept reality and where you are. So what has been your goal since starting Hokie Hoops, and what was your message this season?
I guess the goal was to fill that void you talked about, and there's not a lot of dedicated basketball coverage. I mean, David Cunningham does a phenomenal job at TSL. Yep. There's people who do a great job in the space, but overall, I mean, there's for every probably 10 and maybe literally 10 football podcasts, there's like one basketball one. Mm-hmm. So it's obviously a football focused fan base, football focused administration. And, just wanted to kind of fill that void because like you said, when the football program's not doing great, which now at this point for a decade plus has not been great. A lot of people turn their attention and rest their emotions on the basketball programs. And, we've had some really good years going back to Buzz, and then Coach Young's had some great years. Kenny, you mentioned, where we've been able to put our fandom in Castle and not in Lane. And I just wanted to continue to elevate that because I think it's important. Mm-hmm. And I think when Virginia Tech puts itself as a fan base, when our fan base puts itself behind something, it has the potential to do really cool things. Mm-hmm. We saw that, the best example of that is women's basketball, right? But, I went
softball,
to every
wrestling, baseball.
Everything, baseball. Anytime. Anytime a program is doing well, they get rewarded very heavily by this fan base, and that's something you have to continue to build on. And I think the Buzz era laid a really good foundation that Coach Young has done a good job of sustaining with the fan base support. Now, that being said, Coach Young, and we'll get into this more, has gone through some pretty seismic shifts in the landscape of college basketball that could not have been anticipated. And, if you look at his tenure kind of pre-NIL, post-NIL, you'll see some pretty glaring differences. Now, when you want to draw the line in the sand and say this is when NIL started, that's up for interpretation. But when NIL in its current state started, things have been more difficult at Virginia Tech to compete. And I think, hopefully with the Goodman tweet, people like Chris Coleman and David have talked about this on TSL and others. There seems to be a better backing for the basketball program after seeing what took place, particularly this year, moving forward. Now, what that looks like, we don't fully understand and know yet. And, in terms of financial figures, we may never know. But overall, it does seem that hey, let's give everything to football mindset may have shifted a little bit. And I've talked about this on Hokie Hoops. Like, you can't just, you have two money-making programs. You can't just cut one off. That's just not a right way to run a business or an athletic department or whatever. And we did that. And as a result, you saw a mass exodus of really good and talented players leaving and going and having success that are going to be in the NCAA tournament this year. And hopefully we don't have to deal with that anymore moving forward with this new support that Jeff Goodman, publicly tweeted about. One thing I want to add to that is, say our numbers in that 15% range, something similar to Clemson. You mentioned, a football-focused athletic department that also wants to be good at basketball. I think that we probably fit in that mindset. That $3 million would be a significant uptick in what we understand our prior budgets to be. That being said, everyone is new to this rev share thing. There's a lot more money being thrown into the player pool. How does that impact the market for a player? That's what we don't know, right? Like, we can say we're in a better position. Yes, we are. We're in a better position relative to where we were a year ago. Are we in a better position relative to the market? That's what we don't know yet. If our budget has gone up, whatever percentage, but the rate for
everybody else's did, right?
But everybody else's did too, and therefore the rate for a starting point guard might go up 50%. Well, if you extrapolate that across the whole roster, all of a sudden you're kind of right back where you were in terms of standing in the sport. That's the part that we don't really know, and we won't really know until we see kind of how everything unfolds once the portal opens. But I did just want to put that out there because I don't want the fans to think, oh, we're in a great position. Well, yeah, relatively speaking, UConn's giving half of that money to their basketball program. There still are, teams are going to have to, in a certain way, decide where they want to put their money and what they care about. And that's going to impact players' rates and the market as a whole. So it'll be interesting to see how that shift takes place once the portal opens in April.
And also, I want to say, too, this is not like me playing blame pie. This is not like, well, we're in this position because of this person, or we're in this position because of this person. The reality is, just like the way the sport has been covered, donors feel the same way. Our donor base for football, when they give money to NIL, are giving money disproportionately, understandably so, to football. So now when you have this $20.5 million that is delegated from the school specifically, they have the choice to say, okay, this is where this money should go because it'll have the greatest impact. Whereas before, if you have 50 donors, let's say, that come in and 46 of them want to give to men's football, basketball just has to work with those 4%, or the rest of sports just say, I'm obviously making these numbers up, but you get the point that I'm trying to make here.
Well, and there's the added point of frustration where if I wanted to go online and donate specifically to basketball right now, I don't think I could do that. So there's that added piece too, where, I've seen it on message boards and on Twitter, and people, on group chats talking about how they want to donate to basketball. They just don't know how. That has been a challenge too. And, the assumption is, and probably up until this point, rightfully so, was that if you donated to NIL at Virginia Tech, it was likely getting routed to football. And I think that assumption was probably true to date. Now, who knows how that's going to look going forward, but that was just another thing. I mean, it wasn't easy to try to support the men's basketball program financially, up until this point.
Another thing worth adding is just everybody thinks that it's kind of funny. everybody thinks that their GM of their football team or their baseball team is the dumbest person in the world. But if you take a look, I just saw this on Twitter the other day. They were talking with Kevin Keats at NC State, who has his own plethora of problems. And a reporter was asking him and saying, hey, like, have you considered filling the GM role, which has been really common. We've seen Virginia Tech mention that Kelly Woolwine was serving in that role. And that's a really important role. It's basically determining how you're going to split up these dollars. I don't know why you would approach it any differently, because it essentially is your front office that you would have in the NBA, the NFL, or as you go down the line. Kevin Keats was shocked by the question, said he hadn't thought about it. It was the first time that he had thought about it, and just an overall bad clip from Kevin Keats in the middle of a bad season at NC State. But what I'm trying to say is everybody's figuring this out. I am really encouraged. I mean, I'm really encouraged to hear Jeff Goodman say this. We don't know, obviously, who his source is, but Jeff Goodman is not the type to just put something out there. So I do feel very good about the future of this basketball team, given what he is saying. Now, shifting over until I'm going to put on, I promise I'm not putting on my BRM 2018-2019 cap. I'm not going to do that. We've learned I don't do that anymore. But college basketball content put out a tweet seen by about 30,000 people. And this is what pisses me off, frankly. Virginia Tech head coach Mike Young will return next season per Goodman Hoops. The Hokies have not made it past the round of 64 since Mike Young arrived 6 years ago. So then you got a bunch of casuals and people who don't know anything about anything chiming in saying how ridiculous it is, this, that, and the third. And what I was really proud of, and Ed, I'm going to give you your props. Same with Chris Arvin, same with David Cunningham, who have been honest about the situation. You see Virginia Tech fans saying you're not telling the entire story, or, you know, X, Y, and Z are reasons why we've been in that position. So again, back to my point, if you want to improve anything in your life, you must first evaluate where you are and where you want to go. So let's do that. Okay. Virginia Tech, in their history, has gone to 13 total NCAA tournaments. In their entire history, have been to 13. Coach Mike Young has been the coach for 2 of them. In the entire history of Virginia Tech men's basketball, they have gone to 2 conference championships. They won the Metro in 1979, and they won the ACC in 2022 under Coach Mike Young. Let's dive into Coach Mike Young's tenure, shall we? Here is the history of Coach Mike Young. Now, if you're college basketball content, you're probably going to say, he's won 56% of his games. Let's go through each season. 56% winning percentage for Mike Young, 2019 and 2020. If you don't remember, this basketball team was a complete put it together because everybody else is playing at Texas A&M situation. Coach Mike Young with the famous, I don't know what to do with my life. Wabisa Bede is my best friend. That team was finished to pick 14th. They ended up finishing 12th, and they beat number 3 Michigan State. They go 16-16. Fast forward to 2020, 2021. Picked to finish 5th, finished 7th, but they won the ACC. That year, Mike Young was 4-0 versus ranked opponents. He beat number 3 Villanova, beat number 24 Clemson, number 19 Duke, number 8 UVA. 2021, 2022, finished 11th, was picked 7th, but they beat 25 UNC and 7 Duke on back-to-back nights. 2022-23, picked 14th, finished 8th with wins over 18 UNC and 6 UVA. 2023-2024, picked 8th, finished 8th with a win over 21 Clemson. And then this year, 13-16, skeleton team, picked 14th, currently 9th. So when you look at these numbers, Coach Young is consistently, I always talk about punching up. He beats a ranked opponent every single year. He goes out there with the team that he has, you know, granted transfers, granted the funding situation, everything else. He goes out there with the team that he has, and he, to my estimation, does the best job that you can possibly ask for. Now, what about some of the common components? The ACC, historic basketball league. Virginia Tech, not a lot of history in basketball. Versus Duke, Virginia Tech in their history is 10-33. Coach Mike Young is 3-6. Versus UNC, Virginia Tech is 7-20. Coach Young is 3-6 versus North Carolina. And then versus Virginia, since joining the ACC, we are 16-26. Coach Mike Young is 5-8, and he's 5-4 since 2021. So you look at all of these numbers, And to me, is Coach Mike Young the answer for Virginia Tech has forever been preposterous to me. It truly, truly has been preposterous to me. You can point to a couple of things and say, hey, we don't play that well on the road. They've played really well on the road this year. We have transfers coming in and out. That is a fair critique if you want to point to that as being a critique. But given Virginia Tech's history and given where Virginia Tech is now, I personally have always thought that was preposterous.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you went through all that, and it's just like all that stuff you just listed, especially the picked to finish X, actually finished Y stuff. Like,
Yes.
could you have a more perfect coach for a school that wants to drive most of its resources to football? Probably not, because he's overachieving given the situation he's in. I don't really know how you could draw that up any better. I mean, the only way to draw it up any better would be for football to actually live up to the expectations. But like, if you're gonna be a football school, well, then hire a basketball coach who can make the most with what you're going to give him, and that's exactly what Coach Young has done over and over and over again.
You look at this year specifically too, Ed. Like, and again, I'm not in the business of counting pockets. I hate that activity. It's kind of silly that I hate that activity because this is what student athletes have want and they got it now. But I just feel weird about doing that. But if you want to look at a very specific example, Miami comes in, buys one of our best players, has a significant multiplication of our resources in NIL. Coach quits. Coach Young's 2-0 against them. And I can't imagine being a donor at the Hurricane Club or wherever you are for the University of Miami to finish the way that they finished. You also look at a team like Vanderbilt. They go out, have multiple Hokies on their team. Vanderbilt's, I put a tweet out about this, their basketball and their football team. They got to be having like an unbelievable year. Vanderbilt's a tremendous team. Comes into our building. Tech plays pretty well. This is at the beginning where, Brandon Rechsteiner is seeing his first large swath of minutes that he's playing. And this is before the team really became the version of itself that it is today. Playing the best basketball we played all season. The team is sick. I mean, granted. So you can go ahead and you can point at where these other players are going. And it hasn't always put them in a better position because the guy that's calling the X's and O's here at Virginia Tech has done such a tremendous job. Look at a Sean Padula. Sean Padula going somewhere, maybe not for greener pastures. I've been to Ole Miss. The grass is roughly the same shade, but maybe a greener wallet. And Sean Padula has been an amazing player at Ole Miss. I mean, think about what this team looks like if Sean Padula is still playing point guard. Never heard a crossword from Coach Young. Never heard a complaint about Coach Young. It's, we're rocking with Ben Hammond. We're rocking with Brandon Rechsteiner, and those two have gotten better as the year has gone on. So that's really the core of where my frustration comes from is, again, and it's understandable, if you want to excel in football and you want to be more than a participant in basketball, I think that's what all of us want to do. We don't just want to be there because that is not a whole lot of fun to exist in that situation. This is exactly the coach that you want. And if you give him the resources that he needs to go out and put together a team that can compete, he is going to squeeze the orange and get every single drop out of that team. And he has done that his entire career dating back to Wofford.
Yeah. And, you talked about the NCAA tournaments made, because I feel like that's kind of the standard, I guess, at Virginia Tech. Like, fans want to be competing for and making NCAA tournaments. Sure. You mentioned that, Buzz made 3, Mike Young's made 2, and, delusional people will say that the one was, lucky because we got hot. No, we didn't. Go back and look at what we did for the 2 months prior to the ACC tournament. We were good that entire year. Outside of the middle stretch when Hunter Couture was hurt, we were good that entire year. But either way, Buzz, the golden era of Virginia Tech basketball, Buzz Williams, right? That's what most fans would immediately jump to. Made 3 NCAA tournaments, made it out of the round of 64 one time of those 3, right? So he beat, I don't even remember who the first round game was, and then we beat Louisville.
St. Louis, Liberty,
St. Louis, and then Liberty. Yeah. Really, really, really good draw. Wasn't exactly a tough draw. Made a Sweet 16, and that's not to take away from Buzz of that team. I love that team. That team was awesome. Yeah. They're a tip in away from, in my opinion, probably going to a Final Four because I think they would have beat Michigan State. But let's not pretend like it was a buzzsaw every year. They got knocked out in the round of 64 twice, and then they made a Sweet 16. Coach Young has made 2 NCAA tournaments at Virginia Tech, lost in the round of 64 both times, and has
Against
won the
Texas
ACC.
and Florida. We didn't really get a great draw either
Yeah,
time.
we didn't
too.
have St. Louis and Liberty. But that's not really the point either. Like, I guess my overall point is when you go back and look at prior to this season for Coach Young here at Virginia Tech, and you compare advanced metrics to what Buzz did at Virginia Tech, man, if it ain't similar, incredibly similar. So, we talk about Buzz as this golden era and Coach Young as, in the eyes of some falling short of that. And I just, statistically, that's not backed up. It's not backed up in recruiting. They both, if you go look at the top 10 highest recruits in school history, they both have very similar amounts of those guys on that list. Now, you mentioned the player retention, that is the one piece of this that is valid. We've had some talent walk out the door, and there you can rhyme or reason a lot of them. Whether it be Naheem Aline leaving and going to win a national title at UConn. Well, he was leaving because Darius Maddox was nipping at his heels. We had talent behind him ready to take his minutes. Guys like David Gasson leaving and going on to have success at Kansas State. Well, he was leaving because he wasn't going to play because Justin Mutz had endless eligibility. So, there were guys who were really good players who these younger, really good players were not going to overtake in short order. Similar situation with
PJ Hall. One could argue that Justin Mutz eligibility kind of
Well, you talk about not even just Mutz, but you had guys play a ton of basketball at Virginia Tech. Hunter Couture, he played so many games and so many minutes that if you're a guard looking to come to Virginia Tech, well, you ain't supplanting him until he's out of eligibility. So that does present a challenge. Now, there's guys we obviously wish we could have kept, right? The Rodney Rice situation is super unfortunate. He's crushing it at Maryland right now. Now, that being said, he could have played for us all last year, and we could have had a really good year, maybe win 1 or 2 more games, make an NCAA tournament. He would have left. Yep. He would have gotten paid to go to Maryland. In the same way Sean Padula got paid and Lynn Kidd got paid and Tyler Nickel got paid. So, the financial situation at some point in time was going to rear its head, and it did. And we lost a lot of talent. You mentioned Padula. He's the best player on an NCAA tournament team. Tyler Nickel is a starting guard on an NCAA tournament team at Vanderbilt right now. MJ Collins coming off the bench at Vanderbilt, and et cetera, you get on the list. But overall, I really think the point that I want to kind of walk away from this with is one, it's nice to see that the resources and the backing from the donors and from the administration is stepping up. Now, what that looks like relative to the market, we will find out. But either way, it's nice to see the support, and especially from the fan base too. It's been cool to see, as the year progressed and this team got better, on message boards, Twitter, what have you, posts about give this team a chance, give Coach Young a chance, give this staff a chance. It's been cool to see the fan base kind of realize how good this guy really is at coaching basketball. So that's been nice. And then the other piece of it is what you mentioned when you rattled through the years, pick to finish X, finished Y. That has happened every year but one at Virginia Tech, where we have outperformed preseason expectations. And that goes back to something I've said on Hokie Hoops for probably 2 years now, which is if you give this staff, whatever you want to call it, lower third ACC resources, tier 3 resources, you're going to get a tier 2 result, et cetera, et cetera. So these guys are going to punch above their weight. They scout at an incredibly high level. Think about the guys who have made an impact during this tenure. It's Hunter Couture, Keve Aluma, Grant Basile,
Storm Murphy.
Yeah, Storm Murphy, Justin Mutz, some of the best players and most well thought of players in school history who came out of nowhere. And that's a credit to the scouting ability of this staff. Even guys who have gone elsewhere, like Sean Padula, what a scout. That guy was I believe off the top of my head, he was probably 125th ranked recruit in the country, something like that. And now he's one of the best point guards in the best SEC we've ever seen. Just unbelievable scouting job there.
Development too. he had 1 year, and this is credit to Wabisa Bede. This is in no way a backhanded comment. Wabisa Bede was one of the guys that everybody would throw their laptop on the ground when he would get minutes. And then Mike Young inserts him as the starting point guard, and they go out and they beat Michigan State. So his ability to consistently get the best out of players. I mean, we're seeing it this year. You're seeing it this year with Pat Wessler. People are like, man, Pat Wessler's going to have to play big minutes. Pat Wessler's played great minutes when he's asked to play great minutes. And that speaks to the development that he's been able to do with these players. Malijal Poteet, this guy has 1,000,000 miles on his body. And for him to be a consistent and viable player in the ACC, it's been tremendous.
And I think, that's a good point. And I think that brings it kind of back full circle to the NIL situation and Coach Young at Virginia Tech, and what Virginia Tech needs in a basketball coach. And what they need in a basketball coach is someone who is going to make the most of the resources provided, given the fact that it's a football dominant fan base and attention is going to go to football. So when you have a coach who can scout like crazy, make the most out of what he's given in terms of resources, and coach their way to victories and punch above their weight, when you put all that together, it's pretty tailor-made for what Virginia Tech needs in an ideal basketball coach, unless they're going to just flip it on its head and decide we don't care about football anymore. We're going to fund basketball, and that's not going to happen. So,
and it should.
You mentioned Malijal Poteet at Rice and Justin Mutz at Delaware and Hunter Couture, and the ability to find guys like that, and then you sprinkle in some of these higher rated recruits, these 4-stars. We've got 2 4-stars coming in next year. One of who I think is going to play immediately. So, I think he's just the perfect coach for Virginia Tech. And, if you're going to get upset at the situation, it seems like most fans' frustration at how this season has gone, it started out upset at the coaching staff, and it quickly shifted to upset at the resources, because they've seen us punch above our weight and almost beat SMU, almost beat Louisville, almost beat Pitt. You're one player away from 3 or 4 wins here and there. And having a totally different outlook on how this season looked. So it'll be interesting to see how things go moving forward. I'm very optimistic about the new approach, and maybe giving the proper resources to this basketball program, and to see where that can go, because you've got a nice little core here, man. Again, back to the scouting, you've got a nice core of Lawal and Jaden Shute and Ben Hammond and Tyler Johnson, and young guys who have shown a lot of promise and helped you win games really early in their careers here. And then can you take that added influx of resource and build around little nucleus you've got going on? And that's what I'm kind of excited to see as the portal opens. Hopefully we're able to use these resources to retain the talent we have and add some around it. And then you just roll the ball out and let Coach Young coach. And I'll like our chances no matter who we're going against, and if it's a coaching matchup.
Yeah. And I think, last message here too, stick with this team. I also think that it's worth pointing out, a huge credit to Coach Duffy. We don't have any information on what their NIL situation is or anything else. And what she's been able to do is nothing short of tremendous. But stick with this team, getting out there, being in Castle, getting out there, supporting an ACC tournament, getting involved in NIL if you have the ability to do so, does pay long dividends. And if you want to talk about ROI, those 2 programs have consistently provided ROI when they have gotten the backing that they needed. And we've come a long way, Ed, from when basketball hadn't been covered very much at Virginia Tech. And it's crazy to think about it these days. The message around Kenny Brooks the year before we went to the Final Four was, man, he can't win conference games. Kenny, man, he can't do it. That was it, because people were so frustrated with the situation with football, and they would turn to these other sports and just, they'd be looking at something to be pissed off about, but there's no football on the CW or ACC network or ESPN. So it's who is my next victim that
it's a football fan base. And, I feel like most of the time, the basketball programs both have really, really dedicated small followings that are at every game, and they're they know all the players and they know what's going on. But most of the time, I feel like most of the fan base is kind of, even during a basketball game, they've got one eye over here and they got one eye on what's going on in football. Like the other day, we're playing Syracuse, and it's like in overtime, and I'm getting more texts and tweets about Bashal Tutin's 40 time than
Which
the
was
and
fast.
one then Ben Hammond's 21-7-7 to beat Syracuse, and win our 8th ACC game of the year. It's a football focused fan base, and that's okay, but that doesn't mean you just cut off your leg, which is your basketball program, so that the football program can just hobble around on one foot all the time. Like, we really need to, you have two that make money. Focus on two. You don't have to focus on one. That's not how other schools are doing it. Like you mentioned, Texas Tech, Clemson, publicly out there supporting both programs. You can do both.
And if you want to point to an example, 2016 football team was rolling, basketball team was rolling, and ultimately a lot of people will be a lot happier if we see wins on the hardwood, but especially if we see wins in football. And this is a huge year for Virginia Tech across all of these sports, and it's obviously changing a lot. So I hope this was informative. I hope this was helpful. And again, I do want to end this by saying I'm tipping my cap to all of the fans, because I think they've been very smart on this. I think they've been very realistic on this. And Virginia Tech is going to the ACC tournament. They will be playing in the ACC tournament after being picked to not go. It was a foregone conclusion. So I tip my hat to the fans, tip my hat to this basketball program, tip my hat to the players and the coaches. Really well done. Ed, any last notes here? I've been enjoying watching Juan Soto in a Mets uniform, hitting home runs, having fun in the bullpen, having fun in the dugout. Excuse me. Looking forward to it. We got to catch a game when it swings around.
Yeah, I don't have any more thoughts on the basketball stuff. I just got UNC tonight, and then a tough game to end the year against a really good Clemson team before the ACC tournament. So, hey man, me and Pete on Hokie Hoops, we both at the beginning of the year, I think, said 8 or 9 ACC wins would be a huge win. And then after non-con, we were both like, man, if they can win 6, I'll be thrilled. And they've already got 8 with 2 more chances. So, overall, as happy as you can be with the current record and, what's going on, but looking forward to seeing kind of how the next couple months unfolds once the portal opens up and what this staff's able to put together with these new resources. So, thanks for doing this. This was good. I hope people enjoy this.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I mean, you were here too. So, all right, everybody, have a good one. Enjoy the UNC game. If you're watching this after the UNC game, point still stands. Take care, everybody.